This is Anthony speaking, the account manager for the European institutions and agencies at AWS. Welcome to this webinar on security and compliance. As a recap, the topics and objectives of this webinar are the security and compliance fundamentals at AWS, putting the Cloud Act into context, sharing some best practices, and especially in terms of encryption and key management, and explain how you can actually improve your security posture by using AWS services. So this presentation will be given by Gerald and Paul, who are both regional leaders from the security and compliance team in Europe. Just some practical information before we start. So everybody's muted because of the number of attendees, but you can post your questions during and after the webinar in the tool. We will address the questions at the end of the webinar. Any question that we don't have time for to address, we will take it with us and we will provide you the Q&A after the webinar together with the slides and the recording of this webinar. There will also be a poll at the end of the webinar and a survey, so please bear with us till the very end so that we can hear your feedback, which is very important to us. A last little point, this is the second webinar we are giving to the EU institutions and agencies. And as from now, we will have a monthly cadence for this webinar. Here you can see the next ones that are planned. So in July, on the 16th, we will have a webinar on containers. After that, we will skip August, and in September, we will dive deeper on serverless technologies. And we also have webinars planned for migrations, analytics, and architecture this year. So now I will leave the word to Paul from our team, and he will drive you through this webinar. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you. Me and Gerald will take you through the next 50 minutes, and we're going to talk as been said, about security and compliance. But I would like to start by going back to some AWS fundamentals. And for you that has worked with AWS before, this is bread and butter. But for you that haven't had the chance to work with AWS, it's good to know this. So the thing is that there are a few things that are fundamental to know when you work with AWS, and that is that we have concepts of regions, availability zones, and data centers. And the region is a number, I normally say it's a cluster of clusters of data centers that are situated in one country, and this has a compliance significance in that we will come to a little bit further into the presentation. Then every region is divided into at least 3 different availability zones, and those are the blue dots you see in the picture here. So the orange dot, for instance, for Frankfurt, that is the region situated in Germany. Then we have a number of clusters of data centers that are situated in different places around the Frankfurt area. And then we do have a number of what we call POPs, or points of presence, where you can pass data and cache data to get low latency and close to the customers. But we're not going to go into them today. But the concept of the region, the availability zone, and the data center is extremely important to understand. And to give you a little example on how it works, let's say that you want to place a file in AWS. Then you have your file in your infrastructure at home, and you pass the file to us at AWS. What happens is, and I'm not going to go down technical, but you get a number of copies of these files spread out in the different data centers in the different availability zones. And the point with this one is that if we lose one of our availability zones, you will still have a number of copies available, so that when you wish to get the file, even if we lost an availability zone, the data will be available for you and you can get it back so that you can work with it. So this is how the region and the availability zones are built. A very important part of how we build our infrastructure is first of all that it's done in a way so that each availability zone is spread out in what's called different floodplains, which means that if we have some kind of natural disaster in one place, it will not affect other places where we do have data centers in the same region. In the picture here, you see how it looks around Frankfurt, where we have data centers in Rudelheim, Fechenheim, and in Rüsselheim. And they are spread out with a distance of 10 or 30 kilometers in this case. This is different in different countries. The important thing to know is that they cannot be too far apart, because we want to have very low latency between the different availability zones in order to process your data. Another thing which I came to, which I talked about in the beginning, is this, that a region is very important from a data sovereignty point of view, because what we do is that if you place, and when you place data in a specific region like Frankfurt, we do not move this. We do not move your data, and here you can see from the C5 at the station that it's not just us saying it. It's also proven by third-party auditors, and it could be good to know, if you're not worked with AWS, that we follow a large number, more than 200 different security frameworks and standard, and we have at the stations for every aspect on how to work with your data, how we do our data centers, how we do incident processing, etc., etc., etc. So it's very easy, if you're interested to see how we work, to be able to follow up on these things. And in addition to the data location, it's also a handling of security keys. And here you can see that you have the possibility to handle, you have the full control over your, or can have the full control over your cryptographic keys, I'm sorry. And that gives you information sovereignty. And Gerald is going to talk a little bit more about this further on in the presentation. Next picture, please. Another tool that is very good to know about is that when you logged into the console, if you're already an AWS customer, you have the possibility with a tool called Artifact to have a look at most of these audit reports. Some of them you need to sign a click-through non-disclosure agreement, but most of the artifacts are available without any further approval to have a look at. And if you're not an AWS customer and would like to still have the chance to view this, you should talk to your account manager that will be able to help you so that you can read the necessary documents. Right, next picture, and then Gerald.
Thank you, Carl. Yeah, here is Gerald coming from Germany. Nice to meet you. I would like to do a deep dive on confidentiality and availability, which is relevant for the GDPR requirements. Security and compliance is a very broad area, therefore we only can have some spotlights on some specifics, but I think the GDPR aspect is kind of representative to understand how AWS works and what a customer needs to do. So the 7 principles: lawfulness, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, and storage limit is purely in the hand of our customers. We don't offer an application. The customer is putting his application on top of AWS, and therefore details like storage limit is something the customer has to define. We need to provide technology to our customers that integrity and confidentiality can be guaranteed. And therefore we're having our 175 plus services. Some of those services are very specifically usable for information security. So encryption, logging, intrusion detection, all those things. We'll have a look in a few minutes. So think about data privacy and data protection in general. The regulation states clearly that the protection needs to be against unauthorized or unlawful processing. So this is the part in between the two of us, our customer and AWS. We need to provide technology that the customer can protect himself against external threat, but as well that AWS is prevented to touch his intellectual property or personal data. And the technical organizational measures we can show that we have implemented, as Paul referred to, we show in our artifact service with all the SOC reports, ISO, PCI, and in Germany, the C5, the Cloud Computing Control Catalog audit report designed by the German BSI. So who is who in that role of data? We as AWS, we are the controller for account and billing information, not for your data. There we are the processor, because you have your person-related data in an application. You own that data. It could be person-related or not. And we only are the processor or even the sub-processor because we don't have access to those sensitive data. So when you talk about the technical and organizational measures, there is some similarity. Both of us, we have to do access control, logging, intrusion detection, and intrusion prevention, but with systems which are separated from each other. We protect the cloud, huge infrastructure in Frankfurt, several thousand hardware servers. You protect your application and the data. Within your subnet, you can operate in our virtual private cloud. We provide information that those technical organizational measures are designed well. This is the ISO certification, 27000 and others. And as well for the last 6, respectively 12 months, with the SOC reports that the effectivity of those technical organizational measures is audited. For example, if there is an incident, that this incident is really dissolved, well understood, and management, chief information security officers, legal, whoever need to be informed internally, but as well externally, that this incident is really fully resolved. In Germany, we're having specifically the C5 for that, and there is an upcoming regulation in Europe where the C5 control catalog might be a very good basis for that, and we establish this type of audit now for all European regions we provide our customers. General data protection regulation, of course, there are a lot of information, and we try to focus on 2 things which are relevant for you. One is the GDPR Center, where we explain how we operate, where we as well provide information about our subcontractor situation. We have subcontractors, but those are 100% daughters of Amazon. For example, in Germany, it's A100 row. They are the data center operators. They are fully Amazon. And by that, we provide a full service, 100%. There are no external subcontractors. The shared responsibility, you already heard about that. Who is responsible for what is a standard situation we always discuss with our customers to make clear where we really provide a service and functionality and where the customer has to step in. In GDPR, there's the data subject, the data controller, and we as the data processor. And when you think about what type of services you would like to use, compute, storage, database, and networking are always the fundamental of that. But here you as well can see that database is something which is something we provide. So we are the system administrator and the database administrator. And therefore, you always have to understand how deep is the service level AWS is offering and what type of encryption service level guarantee do you need. Regarding GDPR, we're having a data processing render, including the standard contractual clauses we need within the European Union in case Privacy Shield might not exist or be valid anymore in the future. As said, we provide the technical organization measures documentation based on our controls. And of course, you as well need to have consent from the data subject to process the data. I recommend that when you start to run an application at scale on the cloud, you as well should go for a security attestation to provide your technical organizational measures as well. Regarding the quality of our DPA, we contacted our authority in Luxembourg, the National Commission for Data Protection, in March 2015 and showed them our DPA, and they confirmed that the content and the scope is sufficient. Still, they're open for negotiation. This is how we have to handle individual risk constraints of customers, but we think with this knowledge that the Luxembourg authority is fine, we are in good place. As well, we registered for the Privacy Shield and did receive the certification, Amazon Retail plus AWS. So what is best practices in the security scope on AWS? So first of all, you start to design a so-called VPC, a virtual private cloud. This is a subnet. You can connect with a router to your network in your data center, and it behaves like an extension of your data center. It's a network where you can put virtual compute powers, so-called EC2, elastic compute, inside. But to access anything within this VPC, you need to have an identity and access management system, IAM. And our recommendation is from the beginning to use encryption, so AWS Key Management Service. This KMS is integrated in a lot of storage systems, as an example, in simple storage, as well in database storage systems. And usually you don't control the cloud, so the foundation on AWS you would like to use manually. You do that by automation. And with AWS config, and you have the ability to restrict human interaction from your own administrators to the systems which are running on the cloud. This always had been a security constraint in the past, that some IT administrators did change systems in production, and you can restrict that easily in the cloud. This is really a new area. How do you get connection to this virtual private cloud? Of course, you could connect through a VPN connection. You as well can use AWS Direct Connect. There you have a dedicated line which comes to the data center close to our infrastructure, in Frankfurt, for example, but it as well can be in Berlin, where we have a point of presence, as told by Paul already. And by entering our network, it is not internet routing anymore. This routing is then purely in the private network of AWS. Our global network is a private network, and by that there is a higher level of protection than if your IP packages are just going through the public internet. For GDPR, the application, the controller of the data, has to take at least 4 technical dimensions into its mind: data portability, encryption, process monitoring, and access control. And the process monitoring is something I didn't talk about yet. Therefore, I would like to use a minute or two for that. CloudTrail is our logging system, you can say. Every keystroke of an administrator is seen in CloudTrail. You can see that a machine is started in Frankfurt or in Dublin or in Stockholm, and this was according to policy fine. But you as well can define that it should not start in China, in Australia, in the US. And if somebody would like to do that, and he sends an initiation code to spawn this machine, automatically, based on the CloudTrail information, based on this logging information, this could be detected, stopped, and corrected. And this gives a high visibility in whatever happens in your infrastructure. Nobody can do something without being traceable. And this exactly helps in GDPR compliance as well, and it enriches the security at all. More and more, we are facing discussions about data portability that customers are asking us, and what is with my application? And an application is always designed kind of for the infrastructure underneath. And if you would like to decompose that, use containers like Docker, go for Kubernetes, which is a kind of an open source system, which is available at all cloud service providers and even on premise. And if you use containers, you can put your application inside of those containers, and you as well have application portability and not only data portability. So discussions we had with the European Commission regarding switching and porting and all the aspects of a customer need to have transparency, that not only it's easy for him to enter the cloud and to use the systems within that platform, but as well to have the ability to step out of that whenever he thinks it's not reasonable to stay with this cloud service provider anymore. He needs to have this ability, and we can support our customers with that. And this support from a solution architect is free of cost. We do workshops with our customers. We help them to design the application that it's portable, and we help them to design the application that it's secure with the so-called well-architected review. We are experts in our own tools, and therefore we, or partners of us who are certified, can do this kind of quality assurance that the application is really secure and no data leakage can happen. We have a lot of services, as said, 175 plus. And when GDPR came up, we had to analyze each single application if this is supporting our customers to achieve GDPR compliance. And therefore, we have an overview, and this side here, service capability for privacy considerations. And oops, this was the first. And 122 of all of our services have explicit configuration for encryption, deletion, or monitoring of processing. This supports our customers to have data privacy according to regulation. Just one example regarding encryption. So you can, for data at rest encryption, go either for client-side encryption. So you encrypt your data before the data is submitted to the AWS services, or a server-side encryption. So our infrastructure, our automates encrypt on your behalf data. And therefore, when you think about how you manage your crypto policy, how you manage your crypto and cipher material, we need to talk about encryption. What is the risk about, is AWS able to access keys which are generated within the cloud? Clearly, we say no. We can prove that as well with the FIPS certification of our Cloud HSM and KMS. But I think it's reasonable that you challenge us and ask us questions about that. And then you can make it an educated decision if you can trust AWS, or if you say, I'm more cautious, I do the client-side encryption, it might be less performant, but it might be more secure. This is a risk decision. My option is clear, go for server-side encryption and encrypt everything, rotate keys, and it's good, but you need to have confidence in your own decision. Just give you an example about how server-side encryption is working. So it starts all with the plain text data. And Amazon S3 is a storage service, a simple storage, therefore S3. There, the request is to encrypt the data. So first of all, a data key request will be sent to the so-called key management service. And this will be the number 3 data key, as you can see, plus the encrypted data key, encrypted by the, in red, customer master key, which resides in the key management service. Then both components will be stored. The encrypted data, which is encrypted by the data key, and on the local machine, the plain text data key is thrown away after the encryption. Plus, in parallel to this object in the S3, in the storage bucket, the envelope encrypted, so-called envelope encrypted data key. And same is the other way around when you would like to decrypt the process. You have, as said, the encrypted data plus the encrypted data key. And then the encryption request is done. A decryption request is done, and the encrypted data key will be sent to the key management service. There, the customer master key will be used to decrypt the data key, because the customer master key may not leave the secure environment of the key management service. And the data key, of course, is then transfer encrypted, but can be used on the Amazon S3 service to decrypt the data and hand you over the plain text data. In general, we're having then discussions with customers about how secure is that. And just a few points about this security functionality. No AWS operator can access the host is called the KMS system. The KMS system is operated in 2 modes. Either it's fully functional for customers and no AWS employee can interact. Besides, an employee of AWS can send the reboot request, and then the system will be rebooted. All keys which are stored in memory will be lost. They will be flushed before the system is rebooted. And then there is no key material on the host anymore. Then automated or manual interaction from our side, from AWS, can be done with that system. But as soon or as long key material from customers is in operation on the KMS, no AWS operator can access the host. And therefore, my understanding as a security specialist is we can rely on that system regarding data privacy, and third party is testing if this is the case. We always have this Cloud Act as an elephant in the room, and therefore we use some time to talk about the clarifying lawful overseas use of Data Act. It's not cloud related, it is data related and overseas. So by that, it's not a new law, it's a law which had been designed that the time which had been used based on AMLETs, on multilateral agreement treaties, can be shortened in specific circumstances. First of all, it's a myth that a US company operated with operations in Europe can be just asked to hand over data based on the Cloud Act. Always there need to be a legal binding court order, and the reason need to be a serious crime. It's not for espionage, it is not for political purposes. Severe crime is terrorism, severe crime is drug problems, things like that. And the Cloud Act respects as well the laws of other countries. I did put these 2 quotes from the US Department of Justice there. So the second one is the Cloud Act is encryption neutral. So in case you encrypt your data, we can't be forced to decrypt the data. We only could hand over gibberish. And as well, it is not that easy to spot a single entry, just to give you an insight about that. This information request need to be very specific regarding a person, a specific situation. And as long as, for example, you're using database, we can't look inside of the database. We can't spot that single piece of information. And then we as well can't hand it over. And The idea that we then have to hand over the database at all would violate GDPR, and therefore we can argue against this information request, and we can't be forced to hand over. The Cloud Act is, you can say, as well an option, or there's a benefit that in case the European Union or member state inside of the EU would as well step into a negotiation with the US about a similar framework, then the focus will be reduced on US citizens. And a US citizen who is not residing in the US is something which could be requested then for an information request, but a European citizen will be protected, explicitly protected under the Cloud Act if there is a bilateral agreement. And in September 2019, the European Commission started to go into negotiations to facilitate access to electronic evidence. This is the Cloud Act. And by that, from my perspective, I hope within a year, something like that, there will be a framework which is bilateral, and the Cloud Act will even stabilize this question about information request. This is a discussion we're having quite often, not only public sector, as well in banking and healthcare, but in the public sector, much more relevant is the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act. So there's a US law, and based on that US law, it is not possible to sue a foreign state in a US court, just to say it like that. I'm not a lawyer. I studied geophysics, and therefore all we are saying here is anyway under a kind of a disclaimer. We don't give legal advice, but this is our understanding, how we think and how we practice the situation. So this would protect all governmental accounts on AWS. When we know this is a governmental account, we could use the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act and quash an information request from the US. But it is not that this is something which is working randomly. We have a process, a government request for data, and as well information request process. Why? Because in the days even before the cloud, when Amazon Retail had been in the market, we had been asked for information that a plugin had been sold through the platform, weapons had been sold through Amazon Retail, drugs and all that. Therefore, there had been government requests for data, and we had to develop a process that we handle this protection of our customer data in a structured way. So we publish twice a year the information request report, and there you can see two parts of information. On the left-hand side, you see the full sum of 1,955. This is the sum of subpoenas which had been information requests for Amazon Retail plus AWS. And on the right-hand side, purely the AWS focusing requests, 216. As you can see, something like 10%. And this is easy to explain. We don't have insights into the application of our customers. Therefore, we can't be asked for insights of our customers. This is something completely different if we would offer a platform or software as a service, a CRM, a mail system, whatever. There and other competitors and other companies as well provide this information request reports. They have much higher numbers because they as well can satisfy more and more the information requests from authorities. And by that, we are, from my point of view, in a good shape. I would like to hand over to Anthony about additional information.
Yeah, thank you, Gerald. So we've been going through the security and compliance foundations very quickly, shared best practices. Of course, it's impossible to address all the details of this topic in 1 hour or in 45 minutes. So we are sharing here a few contact points for you. First of all, you can contact the task force or the cloud broker team from the European Commission, who's managing the Cloud 2 contract on behalf of the 65 entities that are on that contract. And they can share you more information on the European Commission's and the EU bodies' point of view in regards to cloud compliance and cloud security. For example, they can share DGHR data protection rules, which they are actually the right party to share for. So here's the email address. You can also access the wiki site, which you can access with your EU login. There is also an FAQ on this topic. And if actually you also want to ask specific AWS related questions, you can contact the whole team here on this email address below. So that's basically it, I think. I don't know. It seems that we have very little or no questions so far from the audience. So please feel free to log your questions because we have foreseen quite some more time for the Q&A. I would like just to add then, in anticipation of some questions, that all the topics in regards to data residency in terms to foreign sovereignty have actually been addressed in the Cloud 2 contract, and so that this information can be shared, of course, by the Cloud Broker team to you as an institution or an agency.
Thank you, Anthony. Since we're waiting for some questions, me and Gerald can talk about a few other things that we didn't have in the presentation. We actually thought that we would use about 10 more minutes for talking. But one of the things when you move to the cloud from a security point of view is that it works a bit different from what you have been used to if you're working in an on-premise data center. And one of the most important things to talk about is automation. And it's automation in a number of ways, not only the regular of DevOps where you deploy your software automated. The thing is that also you can secure the whole the whole pipeline of deploying software into the cloud. And other things that are very important when it comes to automation is that it's not only to detect, for instance, that you have a threat or you're under attack, but the thing is that one of the things that the cloud really helps you with Gerard was talking about these 175 services we have, and more than 50 of those are directly security related. And one of the things I really like about this is that it's easy to write remediation, for instance, on things that is happening. And one of my favorite examples that I normally use when I talk about this is that let's say that if you wish to have control over your virtual machines, your machines that are running inside your account. The thing is that it's very easy if you have let's say that you have a ticketing system where you put support calls and support tickets in to be able if someone has a problem. And the thing is that you can, for instance, pretty easily put up security in a way so that if a person tries to get access to a machine, that there is no open ticket, and the open ticket is not assigned to the person trying to get access to the machine. You can immediately remediate, close down, so it's not possible to reach the machine, and you can alert security to have a look at it. And this is just one example of hundreds that you can put up. And we call that continuous security or continuous compliance. And the tools that is provided in the cloud makes it so much easier to increase the security posture compared to what you normally used to, especially because most of these tools are actually built to work together and help you being compliant. So security, I can say with my experience through the years, is that security in the cloud, it's much more fun than it used to be. Something you want to add to that, Gerald, or do you have something else we could talk about while that could be important for them to know as an initial thing about security?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So the Rook service we all have seen in the past, you just can't have them in the cloud because you have on a daily basis per second an real-time inventory and you know about the status. As well, updating a system is much more easy and you can automate that, as you said, in the cloud than on premise. And what we've seen in the last 3 months when COVID-19 came up, a lot of companies had to start with digitalization, schools, universities for e-learning, but as well research companies who tried to analyze the virus. And they needed ad hoc server capacity. And this is something you just can't do it on premise. You need to go to the clouds to have this ability to be agile. And in the last years, the discussion regarding going to the cloud moved from the point of view to save money to the point of view to achieve agility and transparency. And transparency was what Paul was referring to. You really can see at any time the status, and with the agility, you as well can adjust at any time with a continuous integration and continuous deployment path. And so by that, as Paul said, security is not an obstacle anymore. It is a framework.
Yeah, so it seems that we still don't have any questions coming in. So Anthony, would you like to finish off this webinar maybe? Oh, there is a question for Gerald before. Sorry, Anthony.
No problem.
So,
Gerald, can you see
this is a long question? No. Yes, I first have to read it. Server-side encryption.
Yep, sorry that we let Gerald read it through so he knows what to answer.
Yes. There's one part of the question which is interesting. How would you authenticate the application access the functionality of the cloud HSM? So the authenticity and authorization of either a technical role or a person is really key. And within the cloud, a new functionality had been kind of implemented. This is temporary token. So you don't receive in the production environment a constant accessibility to a sensitive information only for that situation when you need that, and especially not for a person. You can give this role to a machine which has a certificate or whatever, and by that no person can access this service, only a technical role can do that. And the question was targeting to the point, if there is the KMS system, so essentially as a nucleus, of course you can authorize the access on the KMS in a very sophisticated way. For example, one person can be the administrator of the key policy, that the key rotation can be done according to the logic ABC. Another role can be to encrypt data, and another role can be to decrypt data. So in past days, when there had been an administrator who defined the policy for an HSM, he had been able to do everything. In the cloud, you can separate it much better. Let's have a look if there's another question which might be of interest for more people. how do you request? Yes, the same question. In your slide, a generate data key request. How do you trust the requester? So if a person would be the requester, you can enforce that this requester will be authenticated as a multi-factor based authentication. And then you as well could decide that this person may only come from a defined IP subnet. So not from the public internet, for example. Even if it goes through the public internet by VPN, you could define source IP. And then if you say, well, it's not a person, but a technical role, you as well can give so-called secrets to an individual role. And we have a service called Secrets Manager, which is disconnected from KMS. So a person who would like to access this information needs to authenticate with a multi-factor authentication. And then his role will have a temporary access key from the Secrets Manager to access the information or to talk with the key management system. So by that, you have a two-step part. One is the authentication, multi-factor, and then authorization, which can be done by the secret manager. Secret manager, some people compare that with the privileged access management tool. And therefore, this might give you the answer about this question. And then the standard question, part 3, you wrote, no AWS operator can access, I think, but you still are able to build a system that will make it possible. This is a classical discussion I'm having in Germany quite often. So of course, we design our services. We have the code of our services. No subcontractor, no external party, we do that. And by that, theoretically, we might change that. So therefore, in the quality assurance process of any of the PCI, HIPAA, ISO, C5 attestation logics, the integrity of the source code changes is key. It needs to go through a process, not only for our principles, penetration test, and all those things, but as well for our review about the content of the change. So in case somebody would implement, let's name it a backdoor, then you need to, theoretically, several people need to collaborate with each other, that then this threat could become real. But this is a generic question, and we need to be more precise and do risk analysis. And when you then think about exporting a key from a KMS, and that this can be applied to information which is stored in S3, you need to have from every service team at least one internal attacker, and they need to collaborate. And the point is, whenever a person, a human being, is accessing customer data, an incident ticket will be issued directly to the Chief Information Security Officer and to the manager of that person who did that. So as well, those people need to be involved into this fraudulent action, and therefore we are constantly kind of under the risk to lose an attestation like PCI or HIPAA if something like the scenario you described would happen. So it's like in old days with the banks. If you give the bank your money to the bank, you as well can think, well, but they can run away with my money. Trust needs to be established, and our business is working on trust and security, and therefore to do a deep dive on KMS will help to address this question as well. Then is another question, would AWS implement in the future some guarantees over the compliance of the marketplace service compliance? So I understand this question like in app stores, Google, iOS, whatever, where there is some kind of formal quality assurance. This is something we do, but this is information security. It is not something which is related to compliance regimes like GDPR, HIPAA, HDS, whatever. This is something we don't do, explicitly we don't do, but we have for sure regarding the security, a high bar about what type of application is being promoted on the marketplace. They have to sign a contract with us, and the security checks, penetration tests and all that are covered. But the question is enriched if this will be like a C5 certification, a Cloud Security Alliance, something like that, which is of course focusing on information security. We don't force that to our customers, to those marketplace partners, but it is something in Germany I recommend for every ISV who would like to sell to the public sector, for example. There it is a precondition. So I think if a commission or whoever who is enforced to regulate as well would state that not only infrastructure as a service, but as well those components in the marketplace like platform and software as a service need to have a C5 attestation, it will be mutually done, but we can't force them.
Right. And I have a question on how to implement through policies the control over the location of data when the majority of the services are global. Yes, but you have full control of the access and who to that has access to your data, and you can put up controls, for instance with AWS config, that controls that the data cannot be moved out of the region or regions that you allow, and that we don't move the data. Well, it's not only in our documentation, it is in our customer terms. And if you don't trust our customer terms, there are a number of attestations, C5 for one, SOC 2 another one, where this is stated on how we handle customer data. So and these attestations are done by third-party auditors. So it's not just we that say that we do not move the data. It's also there is external proof of this one. And before we finish, I just want to, for you that are interested to reading more about the Cloud Act, in the presentation there were 3 links that are of, or rather 2 links that are really of interest. First of one, it's in the first page on the Cloud Act. It's the IDC white paper on the Cloud Act, and it's also the Department of Justice frequently asked questions. Both these documents together give a fair view if you have an interest but really don't want to go really down the legal line and reading the actual law. Both these documents together will give you a good view on what Cloud Act is about, and as you will get this presentation with all the links and a few more links that is on the next page that Gerald can show you. We have a number of information for you that want to read more information. And with that, I think it's time to hand over to Anthony to finish this little webinar.
Yes, thank you. So I think that we still have a few questions coming in now, but we have to end the webinar. As I said at the start, we will note down all the questions and we will provide you answers afterwards. The slides will be shared, all these links will be shared. A final note I also wanted to make is that for the EU bodies that are part of the Cloud 2 framework, actually in that framework we have an NDA in place with the EU, the contracting authorities that provides you access to AWS Artifact. To repeat, AWS Artifact is our central resource for compliance-related information like SOC reports and other certification from our accreditation bodies. So you can use that NDA to access all this information online and on demand. I'd like to thank a lot Gerald and Paul for this presentation, and I hope to welcome you again on the next webinar in about 2 weeks. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.